On today's episode of Locked On Canadiens, Kaiden Guhle nears a return, and the guy who ends up sitting might not be who we want.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode 1273 of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for subscribing wherever you get your podcast. Doing that supports the show and ensures you do not miss an episode. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's Game Time. My name is Ian Boisvert, also known as @MaybeIt'sIan, and I am not joined today by the wonderful Laura Saba, also known as the Actor Stick. Laura's doing some traveling, so she will be intermittent for the next little while, but I'll be here riding with you guys, going through the week that is to come for the Montreal Canadiens, talking about the news, breaking down the games. We've got one more late game ahead of us this week. I guess 8 o'clock is a late game considering, but we'll be here still, your team every day for a reason. I will be here, and I'm really happy to be able to break this stuff down with you because we have some good news. Kaiden Guhle practiced with the Canadiens. He's been practicing with them, but now he practiced in a full contact jersey, and it seems like he's nearing a return in the near future. We'll talk about what that means for the Canadiens moving forward. We'll break out the weekly forecast once again. Montreal hits the road for 4 straight this week. Their last 4-game road trip of the season. We'll break down what the week should look like for them and what we're hoping to see out of this team over the coming days. And I kind of wanted to spend a little bit more time today on the power play. We talked about it last episode in our weekly recap from last week. The power play struggled last week, and I kind of want to talk about why that is, potential fixes, and just what we should expect to see from them moving forward. But let's start at practice on Monday. Kaiden Guhle makes his return as a full participant. He sheds the no contact jersey, and the news after practice was that he will be traveling with the Montreal Canadiens en route to first St. Louis on Tuesday. It does not mean he will necessarily play right away. I'd be kind of surprised if he did. But for now, he is on the road with the team. The corresponding piece of news that came with that was that he was slotting in next to Lane Hutson and alternating in and out with Jayden Struble. We talk a lot about on this show about, the things we would do and the things we expect Marty to do. Folks who listen to us every day know that that's a pretty regular occurrence for us on this show. And this is a perfect example of that, because I think that what we would do, I'll speak for myself, what I would do is sit David Savard. I think that's at this point, if you are running a meritocracy, that is the guy that should sit. He just has not played very well. Montreal's, really big comeback on Saturday night kind of made folks forget how the first 2 goals were direct results of David Savard making the wrong play. So he, in my mind, would come out of the lineup. But what Marty does, and what we kind of all expected Marty to do in this instance, is to sit Jayden Struble. We don't know that that's for sure going to happen, but I would be surprised that they're, skating Guhle with Lane Hutson, only to then flip the script and sit somebody else instead of Jayden Struble. I wanted to see the Struble-Hutson pairing. They have really great numbers together. They had really great numbers in the brief time before Four Nations. We kind of talked about it as they were coming back as, hey, this is a pair I kind of want to see. They did it right away, and it's kind of just worked. And now we'll be able to see at the very least how much of that is the greatness of Lane Hutson and how much of that is the complementary nature of Struble's game. Big, rough, tumble, stay at home, but also, pretty strong offensively as well, of Jayden Struble with the, finesse, speed, playmaking ability of Lane Hutson. I think the challenge in figuring out whether or not, it was Jayden Struble or the combination of Struble and Hutson, or just Hutson carrying that pair, is that Guhle comes in as a similar archetype of player as Jayden Struble. They're obviously not the same size. Struble is much bigger and much stronger. But Guhle plays a very, similar defensive style. They're, capped potential offensively. So I'm curious to see what that pair looks like without Jaden Struble. But I do feel like this is a mistake that we will look back on whenever Guhle comes back into the lineup. And if Jaden Struble sits, we're watching this and going, yeah, we'd rather have Struble in this lineup than Savard. Now, that's not to say I think Marty is making this decision without any kind of thought. I think that there's two things here that give David Savard the edge over Jaden Struble. One being his penalty killing. He kills a lot of penalties. Whether or not he does so effectively is, remains to be seen. But he's there. He's doing it. And I don't think that they trust Jaden Struble to step in and assume that kind of role from David Savard. And it would be a lot nicer if you could add a Kaiden Guhle back to the penalty kill. Instead of just replacing a David Savard, you now have Savard, Matheson, and then Guhle Carrier on the penalty kill. It's a lot more complete of a unit than it would be if it was just, David Savard or Kaiden Guhle, right? Like having both of them is helpful. And the other aspect is one that, we've mentioned a lot on the show, and we're not alone in that. Everybody knows this. The Canadiens are not, right for right-handed defensemen. They have two on the roster currently in Alex Carrier and David Savard. If they were to remove Savard, they'd have one right-shot defenseman. And you can argue the merits of whether or not that matters, but I think it matters when you're looking at a guy like Kaiden Guhle who should not be playing the right side. And now you'll have David Savard, who only plays the right side, Alex Carrier, who only plays the right side, and Lane Hutson, who Guhle should probably be playing with, looking like he belongs on the right side, even though he is a left-handed shot. And that's not going to be permanent. But these are the reasons why it makes sense to keep Savard in the lineup. I know we're having this conversation before we actually know when Guhle is returning. But it remains to be seen how this will play out. And when Guhle comes back, we have no idea. The fact that he's traveling makes me think it's going to be at some point on this road trip, because if it was just like a 2-game road trip and they sent him along, you'd start to think, well, maybe they just want him to keep practicing with the team. And maybe that's still what they're deciding. Maybe they have no aspirations of playing him on this road trip and they just want him to be practicing with the team. But it's a long road trip. Like, they could have sent him along later. They didn't need to do this. The fact that he was back at practice at home on Monday afternoon and is now traveling with the team makes me think that he'll make a return before, they're back at home for the second half of that back-to-back against the Florida Panthers. I am excited to see another iteration of the Guhle-Hutson pairing, because I think that could work. I do. I think Hutson has shown that it doesn't matter what side he's on. He's going to do Lane Hutson things, which is really awesome. And I just think that Kaiden Guhle was really hitting a stride before he got hurt. And I think that they could complement each other well in the same way that I thought, Jaden Struble and Lane Hutson would complement each other very well. I will say that, and this will be the last point on this, is I'm kind of wondering where they see Jaden Struble as a part of this team moving forward. Because they played him, he played the last couple weeks with the team's no doubt best defenseman in Lane Hutson. Maybe you could argue that it's Mike Matheson as of late, best defensive defenseman. It's Mike Matheson's been playing very well in that role. But I am starting to get, and this not in the sense of these are the same player, but in the sense of, these two guys are sort of finding themselves in the same place. Jaden Struble and Jordan Harris. I'm really wondering what the play is there, because let's look to next season, right? Left shot defenseman. Mike Matheson likely still going to be here. He's got a year left on his deal. I'd kind of be shocked if they traded him unless they got better at the position. Lane Hutson, he ain't going anywhere. He could play the right, but he's a left shot defenseman. Kaiden Guhle, left shot defenseman. He's going to be here. Arbor Xhekaj, left shot defenseman. He's going to be here. That's 4 guys ahead of Jaden Struble. And I'm wondering at this point if it makes sense for the Canadiens to capitalize on whatever value Jaden Struble might have, instead of, trying to just keep him as the 7th defenseman moving forward. You're going to need a 7th defenseman, right? It's going to be somebody that you want to have around the lineup, but you're also looking down in Laval. A guy like Adam Engstrom looks, if he's not ready, he looks pretty close to ready to come up to the National Hockey League. And then you've got guys on the right in David Reinbacher and Logan Mailloux. It seems like we might be headed for another Jonathan Kovacevic type trade where they just move on from a player to give him a chance to go play while recouping some kind of asset in return. I genuinely don't know what their plan is here with Jaden Struble and what they see him as when this team hits the stride to be what they're supposed to be. He's a very valuable player. I'll be pretty disappointed if they can't find a way to make it work, but it's a numbers game, right? Look at all the guys I just listed. It's going to be really tough for him to figure out how to stay part of this lineup. All right, that's enough on the defensive side of things. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the weekly forecast. Montreal hits the road on a 4-game road trip. A rare 4-game week, very busy week ahead for the Montreal Canadiens. And like every week, it is the biggest week of the season, and they will only get bigger from this point on. And we'll get into that in just a minute. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets at the end of the tournament. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easier than ever to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. I've got my eye on a few underdogs, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them. If you miss opening tip-off, you can get in on live bets as you watch the action unfold. The app is easy to use, and it's there for you to get back into betting on games as you're watching them play out. The FanDuel app is simple to use. When I win, I get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to keep you feeling full longer. Personally, I love the no-shells variety. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk or on a road trip, or I just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. I especially like the different varieties of no-shell pistachios like sea salt and vinegar or chili roasted. Those are both really, really great options. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, don't worry, they haven't forgotten about you. The in-shell variety are always a classic favorite. Get snacking and cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, we are back, and it's time to break down the week ahead for your Montreal Canadiens. Like I was saying, a 4-game week, some weird times in this one, so I'll make a note of those as we go so you don't miss the opening face-off. But the road trip goes as follows: at St. Louis on Tuesday, Philadelphia Thursday, Carolina Friday, so a back-to-back with travel there, and Florida on Sunday. So we'll start in St. Louis. That is an 8 p.m. start on Tuesday. I know it's another late-ish one, but it is the last game to start later than 7 p.m. until potentially the playoffs, maybe. Maybe they start some games later then. I don't know. But for the regular season, that's all we've got left is this one 8 p.m. We can do it. The Blues are 37, 28, and 7 for 81 points. They are second in the wild. They're in the second wild card in the West. So essentially, they are the Canadiens' foil in the other conference, right? The Blues are fighting for that last playoff spot. They have a little bit of a better edge in that conference than the Canadiens do in theirs. And the Blues are red hot. They're 8-1-1 in their last 10. They're one of the hottest teams to come out of the Four Nations. And it's why they've kind of reestablished themselves as a playoff team. The Canadiens took the first game of the series 5-2 at home back on October 26th. Yoel Armia, Kirby Dach, Evans, Matheson, Suzuki, all 2 points. Montembeault makes 29 saves on 31 shots to secure the win. The one thing I found about the Blues as I was looking into them for this was that they're a very, very deep team. They have 6 players with at least 40 points. They're led by Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas. Thomas is just about a point per game. He missed some time earlier this season, so he has fewer games, but he's still at that point. Jordan Binnington is an interesting one because I think what's funny is the Four Nations didn't change much. He still has like average stats. He's an .897 goalie since Four Nations, but he's won 7 games and lost 2 of them. Like that seems like the story of Jordan Binnington moving forward. Is it doesn't matter, how, but he's going to win that game. So they have to find a way to get traffic in front of him and try to out battle him, because that's how he wins those games, right? Is just by battling. He's oftentimes a mess in his own crease, and he still finds a way to make the save. They have to make life hard for him on Tuesday. St. Louis's power play at 21.5%. If that sounds familiar, it's because that is an exact tie with the Montreal Canadiens for 17th place in the National Hockey League. So no advantage there. However, the penalty kill for the Blues, 72.8%. That is 28th in the league. So a very vulnerable penalty kill for St. Louis. I believe they will not have Colton Parayko. I believe he's out for a while with an injury. So that's one guy to not look for on the St. Louis Blues. The Blues want to play 5-on-5. They have the 5th most 5-on-5 goals in the NHL at 152. They're behind Washington, Columbus, Vegas, and Dallas. I found that stat funny, not because St. Louis is there, but because Columbus is second in the league in 5-on-5 goals. If that team can figure out how to play on the power play or penalty kill, they're going to be a real problem. But this isn't about them. It's about the Blues. The keys in this one: don't fall behind. The Blues are 31-2-1 when leading after 2 periods. However, at home, when they're trailing after 2 periods, they haven't won. They're 0-11-3. So if you beat them at 5-on-5 and you don't trail, heading into the 3rd period, you should be in good shape there against the Blues. All right, let's head to Philadelphia for a game against the Flyers. The Flyers are 28-35-9 for 65 points, 15th in the East, 28th in the NHL. Montreal took the only other matchup between these guys so far this year, 4-3 back on October 27th. Gallagher and Suzuki with 2 points each. Kaiden Primo won that one 23 for 26 shots in that game. They nearly blew a 4-1 lead in the 3rd period, so it was a little worrisome, but they got the job done there. Travis Konechny still getting it done, 68 points in 72 games. Matvei Michkov, 20 goals, 30 assists, 50 points in 70 games. It's funny, he's kind of fallen off of the Calder race, just really because Dustin Wolf's been incredible. He's still keeping pace with the rest of the rookies in the league, so he shouldn't fall too far out of that race. Goaltending remains an issue. Samuel Ersson has their best save percentage at .886, which is bad. Ivan Fedotov at .877 and Alexei Kolosov at .870. So not getting a ton of help there from their goaltending. Power play is 30th in the league, 13.8%. But keep in mind the Canadiens penalty kill has struggled lately. They gave up a couple of power play goals to the New York Islanders, who are the worst power play team in the league. So do not take this team lightly on the penalty kill, or on the power play, that is. And on the penalty kill, 77.8%, 17th in the league. Key to this one for me: don't play down and don't get pushed around. If you recall, last game there was a lot of shenanigans because the Canadiens refused to be pushed around. If you remember, Sean Couturier caught Doc up high in the neutral zone. He doesn't actually get him, but Doc throws his head back, and with him taking a lot of headshots, the Canadiens took some exception to that. Xhekaj grabbed Couturier, didn't throw a punch. Couturier reluctantly dropped his gloves, and then Sealer jumps Xhekaj from behind. Arber Xhekaj got the only penalty there, and unsportsmanlike. So I would expect some more nonsense in this one. It seems to be par for the course for the Flyers. And I would expect Dobish probably gets that game if you're looking at the goaltending. All right, moving on. Carolina, 43-23-4, 90 points, second in the Metro. This is the second half of a back-to-back. Montreal won 4-0 in their only matchup back on February 25th. Suzuki and Laine each had 3 points. Montembeault had the 20-save shutout, a very poor effort from the Carolina Hurricanes in that one. I am expecting them to be a lot better in this one at home. That was one of the rare Mikko Rantanen games for the Carolina Hurricanes. He only played 13 for them, and one of them was against the Canadiens. Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis lead the way with 65 and 53 points respectively. They really don't have a true star. Those are their top players. They traded Marty Necas midseason, who was, I think, second still on that team in points. They've used 5 goalies this year in Carolina. Pyotr Kochetkov, Freddie Anderson, Spencer Martin, Yaniv Perret, and one Dustin Tokarski has played games for the Carolina Hurricanes. Canadiens fans of a certain age will remember when Dustin Tokarski was starting playoff games for the Montreal Canadiens. Power play for Carolina, 17.9%. That's 27th in the league. Again, they lack real star power up front, real goal scoring ability up front. It's by committee. So that's sort of to be expected. But their penalty kill is excellent, 84.9%. That is the best penalty kill in the league. However, I will add that the last time these two teams played each other, Montreal had 2 power play goals in that game. So who knows what the future holds in this game. But for me, the keys are that Carolina is going to be better than they were the last time. You got to let them shoot from the outside. They want to take those shots, either block them or let whatever goalie is in net see them. If it's Montembeault, just hope they're not from too far out because he likes to give those ones up. And just you're going to have to take advantage of whatever chances you get. Carolina is a very stifling team. Montreal is going to have their hands full in that one. All right, last game of the road trip at Florida. The first half of a home and home against the Panthers. That is a 1 p.m. start on Sunday. So if you have not already made plans for Sunday afternoon, hold off so you can watch the Canadiens and Panthers play. Florida's 43-25-3 for 89 points, first in the Atlantic. Montreal's taken, surprisingly, the first 2 games of the season series against the Panthers, and one more win will clinch that season series. 4-0 win in Dobish's first NHL game in a shutout, and a 3-1 win just a few weeks ago on March 15th. They've outscored Florida in the season series so far 7-1. I will add, in the last game back at the Bell Center, the Panthers were extraordinarily sloppy. They lost the turnover battle 25-9. The Canadiens scored a few goals directly off of those turnovers. So I would expect the Panthers are going to be better. Sam Reinhart, 35 goals, 75 points. Barkov, 19 goals, 64 points, but only in 61 games. The real story with the Panthers, though, is who's not playing. Matthew Tkachuk's still not back. He probably won't be back before the playoffs. Brad Marchand isn't playing. They're targeting April 8th as a return for him, so he won't make his debut against the Canadiens in this game. And Dmitry Kulikov is week to week, which doesn't sound like a lot, but he averages 19 minutes a night for the Florida Panthers. So it is a sizable loss for that team. Power play and penalty kill, both 11th in the NHL. Funny enough, 24.3 on the power play, 80.9 on the penalty kill. And Bobrovsky, 907, 246 with 5 shutouts. So, look, I think like Carolina, we can expect a better effort from the Florida Panthers, even with the holes that they have in the roster. They're going to be pretty rested, too. The Panthers, they played Sunday against the Penguins, and they won't play again until Friday at home against Utah. They've been at home the whole time. So expect a rested Florida Panthers team. Montreal, last game of the road trip, you want to leave on a good note. So hopefully the Montreal Canadiens can find a way to take the season series against the Florida Panthers. They still have one more left against Florida, but winning that one will secure them the season series. All right, that's it for your weekly forecast. When we come back, I want to do a little bit of talking about the power play and figure out what's going on after a really down week for the power play, and we'll get into that in just a minute. There's nothing like watching basketball live, the energy of the crowd, the sound of the sneakers on the hardwood, one of my favorite sounds in sports, and maybe even a celebrity sighting courtside. Or maybe you want to take in one of those NHL playoff races in person. Montreal's playing some meaningful games down the stretch. Maybe you want to get to one of them. If either of these applies to you, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks, filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time scrolling through thousands of tickets. Laura and I just took in a Habs game in Buffalo, and yes, I went to Game Time to secure our tickets. Why? Because I got to see the view from our seats ahead of time, so I knew exactly what I was driving 7.5 hours to go see. And with the lowest price guarantee, I had peace of mind knowing I had the best deal for our seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, home stretch. I haven't messed things up yet, Laura, so rest easy. Things are going okay here. And something that's going a little less than okay is the Montreal Canadiens power play. We talked about it last episode in our weekly recap. They had 2 goals all week against the Islanders. Patrick Laine practically into an empty net that was essentially vacated by Ilya Sorokin because he cared more about drawing the penalty or drawing the goalie interference on Juraj Slafkovsky than he did about making the save. And then Suzuki had one against Ottawa earlier in the week, but that was it. Just 2 power play goals. And, a couple of those games, a power play goal here or there could have meant the difference between 1 point and 2 points. So I kind of want to talk about this because I think a lot of the same problems are still there. One of them being re-entry on the power play. We talk about the drop pass, which at this point, I don't even really have an issue with the drop pass itself. The problem is we all kind of look at the drop pass as the issue, and I don't think that's true. I think the issue is what happens after the drop pass. What happens when they're all just standing at the blue line and not, hopefully not getting a penalty just for standing like Emil Heineman did earlier this year, or like just a few games ago, come to think of it. I don't know that the issue is the drop pass. I think it's what they do after, because so many times, on the first unit at Suzuki, he gets that drop pass and he goes in with speed. And then he gets over the line and he can either, dump it in for himself to go after it. He can keep skating it deeper into the zone. But what he often tries to do is, at that point, he's backed up the defenders just a little bit, and he tries to give it to, Laine on the boards, on the left wall, right inside the blue line. And oftentimes what that leads to is Laine making a poor decision with the puck because he's just under a lot of pressure in that moment. There's not a lot of, chances for him to move the puck. One thing I'd like to see on power play 1 is not having Nick Suzuki be the guy who goes into the zone off the drop pass. I kind of want to see Lane Hutson do it. For the same reason that I love seeing Alex Newhook do it on the second pair. It's just, I think they're shifty skaters. I think that kind of suits Lane Hutson's game. The fact that they do the drop pass on the power play and it's not to Lane Hutson seems like a complete misuse of his skill set. So I'm hoping maybe they make some adjustments in that field, especially because Nick Suzuki's on both units. He plays all 2 minutes of the power play. His role changes, funny enough, because he is the one on the re-entry on the first unit, but the second unit that belongs to Alex Newhook. So he kind of shifts a little bit, despite staying on the ice the whole time. I mentioned the re-entry a lot because I think when they win the opening draw and they're able to get set up, I think they're actually quite good on the power play. I think that on games where they're able to get the puck to Patrik Laine, it's automatic. And other than that, they kind of struggle to find, guys who can score. Here, I have in front of me every power play goal they've scored in the month of March. At the Islanders, it was Laine. Versus Ottawa, it was Suzuki. Versus Florida, Laine again. At Seattle, Laine again. Versus Buffalo, Caulfield and Slafkovsky scored. And at Buffalo, Caulfield. So, look, it's the Laine show. It's been a while since Caulfield scored. He's kind of gone cold. That would help matters if he was able to chip some in. Especially in the last game against Colorado, Slafkovsky has been very good at finding Cole Caulfield on that back door. They just haven't been able to score on it, and I think that probably changes, just regression to the mean. Caulfield will bang a couple more of those in as the season wraps up here. But I also think that good teams like Colorado and good defensive penalty killing teams like Minnesota, they've and those two are the ones that stand out. I'm sure there are others, but they've done a great job of just isoing Patrik Laine and making him ineffective. And if you're the Montreal Canadiens, you should say, cool, thanks. And because now you've got a 4-on-3 on the rest of the ice. The problem is that there's no automatic trigger guy on the rest of the ice, right? The other 4 players would be Lane Hutson, Nick Suzuki, Juraj Slafkovsky, and Cole Caulfield. Cole Caulfield's probably the guy that you want to pull the trigger, but oftentimes he's on the other side of the ice where Laine is. He's usually just on the goal line instead of, up at the point where Laine usually is. So they have to either find a way to get Caulfield the puck more over on that side or move him to the slot. Have Nick Suzuki move around. Maybe have Lane Hutson take some more shots. I would kind of have liked when we've seen him take one-timers and seen him shoot the puck more often as of late. But I think as long as teams are taking away Patrik Laine as an option to shoot, the Canadiens need to find a way to get the other 4 guys going. Caulfield has been very cold as of late. He's gone, I think, 3 or 4 games without a goal to this point. Him getting back into it would spark this power play in a way that would be meaningful. It could turn the tide in some of the games that they have ahead of them. And I just think that As long as they are shading Patrick Laine as much as their opponents have been, it is paramount for the rest of that unit to figure out how to score on the power play. Because right now they're just not getting it done, and they've had a lot of opportunities. I think they had 13 chances on the power play this past week. It's just not good enough. So hopefully we see some improvement, some adjustments as they move on to the road trip and try to stay in the hunt for that second wildcard spot. They're in the driver's seat as of right now, but a couple bad games and that could change. So the Montreal Canadiens need to keep finding points. One way they can do that is to improve their power play. All right, let's hit our trivia and then get out of here. I have a bit of a mea culpa on this trivia, so I'll reread the question and I'll talk about how I might have misinterpreted or I might have misled folks with this question. But in the Habs 5-0 comeback against the Rangers on February 19th, 2008, Ryder had 2, Kovalev had 2. Who had the other Habs goal? I think at the time I said who had the other Habs goal, who helped force overtime. It wasn't the 5th goal, but he did force overtime. So my apologies to people who might have answered Alex Kovalev, who tied the goal with the very famous clip of him hitting a one-timer and then laying on his back with Koivu over him. It's one of the greatest pictures at the Bell Center of all time. The answer was Mark Streit, who at the time it looked like Michael Ryder had a hat trick, but it was a deflection from Mark Streit that gave the Canadiens another goal in that comeback. So Mark Streit gets that one. User Super F maybe on YouTube was first. Super Rain and Good Sport followed. Today's question, I mentioned Dustin Tokarski earlier when talking about the Carolina Hurricanes goaltending situation. Dustin Tokarski started his career with the Tampa Bay Lightning, making his first NHL start on January 16th, 2010. This would be a losing effort. 2 former Montreal Canadiens scored goals in that game. Who were they? One was on Tokarski's team, and one was against Dustin Tokarski. So if you have the answer, put it in the comments on YouTube. Send it to us via email, lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. We'll shout you out if you have the answer right. And that's going to do it for us today on this episode. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter with local coverage that you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We are posting everywhere you can find social posts, Bluesky, Instagram, TikTok, Locked On Canadiens, and all of those places. LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com is the best place to contact us and to give us your mailbag questions. We do a mailbag at the end of the week, and we would love to get your participation in that. It's a lot of fun every week to go through and talk about how smart our listeners are, because we truly, truly appreciate the support. One other place you can find us that's somewhat new, we are available on Amazon Fire TV on your free Fire TV channels app. Click the Montreal Canadiens logo in the hockey section, and you can find our show there and watch all of our episodes on there as well, if that's a place that you prefer to consume content. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow.